All right, guys, so turns out the Pentagon has failed an audit again. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. They say here defense spending reaches record high as Pentagon fails its audit for the 5th time. Now, let me give you the backstory here. Back in 1990, apparently Congress passed a law that directed all federal agencies to produce regular audited financial statements. I'm reading from the piece here. More than 30 years later, the Department of Defense is the only agency that has never passed a single audit, and now the Pentagon has just announced that they have failed their 5th attempt. By the way, these audits themselves are tremendously expensive, enormous undertaking, requiring 1,600 auditors. That cost, back in 2019, about $428 million to conduct and another $472 million to try to fix the problems that the audit uncovered. Obviously, that attempt to fix the issues is completely failed. So as audit costs, they say, approach $1 billion a year with no meaningful change, the conclusion is obvious. Audits are not enough to bring the Pentagon's bookkeeping back into order. Much more than incremental improvement is needed to create transparency. But for now, the Department of Defense seems intent to keep trying the same thing and hope for different results. This comes on the heels of Congress passing an $858 billion budget for the Department of Defense. And when they can't pass an audit, it just shows you this is a gigantic slush fund. This is a higher defense budget than at any point during the Cold War. It gets voted for overwhelmingly. There are a few handful of what's the word I'm looking for? Objectors, yes, yeah. To the massive amounts that get spent here ultimately. And there is an effort by a bipartisan group of 8 senators to pass something called the Audit the Pentagon Act, would require any entity within the Department of Defense that fails an audit to surrender 1% of its budget a year. So at least there would be some incentive for them to get their act together and have some sort of transparency and accountability. But, you know, Saagar, this is one of these stories that it'll be a blip on the radar. It will not even really get covered by the mainstream press because it happens so routinely. But we should continue to be shocked and outraged that this much money is going to an agency that cannot even account for where the funds are ultimately going.
And the crazy thing is, it's still costing $1 billion a year to keep doing these failed audits. So clearly, the entire system has to be revamped. And yeah, look, I mean, we should all care. Like, if you're going to spend all this, if you're going to spend nearly the GDP of like several nations combined, like you should at least find out if it's being spent properly and or well. Like, are we getting anything for this? And this has always been one of my major criticisms too of the military-industrial. Like, it's not even their particularly good at what they do.
Right.
Look at the F-35 program or many of these others which have had massive cost overruns without being actually effective, and then the Chinese will just steal it and do it for like 1/20th of the cost. I'm like, well, hold on a second. Like, what did we just do here? I don't know. It's a failure on so many levels, and of course it doesn't get any, you know, even close to the amount of coverage that it deserves, even from the so-called defense press. Like, they just look past this stuff.
Yeah.
Mostly because they get funded.
Yeah, that's right. And they just accept it as like, oh, well, that's their 5th, but this is old news. They failed an audit for 5 years now, so what's the big deal? It's like, well, that in itself
is a huge story.
Is the big deal. That's a huge, huge story. And so there is no way, ultimately, to have any sort of accountability on an agency when you are just willing to funnel them billions and billions. They can't account for it. And so, of course, they're not going to get their act together when they can just go and get an even larger defense budget increase the next time around. This is bipartisan. Republicans, Democrats, really doesn't matter. And the fact that there is no sort of shock and outrage over this is itself extraordinarily telling, ultimately.
Absolutely. All right, we'll see you guys later.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now. And Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us. And if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.